The Smithsonian Faculty Fellowship Program represents a rewarding academic professional development opportunity for faculty at Montgomery College. The fellowships are a product of a unique collaboration between Montgomery College and the Smithsonian Center for Learning and Digital Access. It's the first of its kind between the Smithsonian Institution and a community college.
Deb Solomon, the program coordinator of computer gaming and simulation, led the formation of MC's Computer Gaming and Simulation degree program and has created new classes in game development, including the first college-level class on extra gaming and health games. A former human rights activist and labor lawyer, she has written book chapters about First Amendment rights for game content, as well as on educational games and the use of games in homeschooling environments. She has led student teams in developing games for industry partners, such as the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
Hi, everyone. Bring this down a little bit. So my Smithsonian project was about video games, board games, and democracy, titled Using Escape Games to Explore the History of Student Activist Movements. And I'll talk about each part of that. So first of all, why escape games? Escape games are a booming area of the gaming industry. There are at least 20 escape game companies just in Maryland and many more around the world and around the country. Local escape companies in Rockville have been hiring students from our program, so this is a good career prospect for our students. And libraries, museums, and schools are increasingly using escape room games to educate. So they're not just commercial games, but also for education. So escape games, and I'll talk a little bit about what they are in case you haven't experienced one, they're also really good for learning, and they provide a really immersive and cooperative learning experience, not just for players of the game, but also developers of the game. So escape games are about solving a mystery. And a mystery involves a narrative, a story, and also puzzles that the players have to solve together cooperatively. So some typical examples that you'll see in commercial escape rooms are escaping from a prison, investigating a crime scene, escaping from a zombie outbreak, things like that. High stakes, timed scenarios that a group of people have to solve a puzzle to escape and complete the scenario. So these are immersive, they're timed, which increases the tension and pressure. They're completed in a small group working cooperatively. And the length, narrative structure, puzzle mechanics, and immersion leads to in-depth examination of complex topics like democracy, like civics education. And this is both for the players solving the puzzles and resolving the storyline, and also for the developers, because you have to understand a story pretty well in order to create puzzles and resolve it. So these games simulate complex systems and pose challenging problems, training both players and developers to think critically, creatively, cooperatively, and systematically about potential solutions. So these were the topics that the students in my board game class chose. And escape games is just one of the projects that we do in that class. They also design other non-digital games. And I told them, they can pick any topic of that's an example of a student protest movement, any side, they can pick any side of that topic. And these were the ones that they came up with. So the first one, the White Rose Society, was a small group of students and a professor during World War II, and they spread leaflets and posted graffiti in opposition to the Nazi Party. And then many of those students were imprisoned and many were killed. And the top picture there is Sophie Schnall and some of the other people in the White Rose Society. Another group picked the Greensboro lunch counter sit-ins, and I'd shown them to kick off the project the February 1st documentary about the Greensboro lunch counter, and they were very inspired by that. And that protest, and you can see the 4 young men who started the Greensboro sit-ins, trying to integrate lunch counters at Woolworth department stores in Greensboro, North Carolina. And the protests went on for about 6 months and were very successful and led to integration around the US. The other topic that students chose, and actually 2 groups chose this one, were the Kent State shootings, which occurred on May 4th, 1970 during Nixon's administration. And this was during a student protest against bombings in Cambodia. The Ohio National Guard opened fire on college students protesting at a college campus. And they killed 4 students and wounded 9. And the uproar after that killing was so huge that 4 million students around the country went on strike, and many schools and colleges closed for a period of time while that was ongoing. So they picked some very deep and tragic events. And you may be thinking at this point, well, is that appropriate for a game? You know, is this really, games are fun. These situations are not fun. But they dealt with the situations very, very sensitively. And I'll come back to that in a little bit. So we went to the National Museum of American History. I love this picture because it looks photoshopped. It looks like we weren't really there. Yeah, it looks like cardboard cutouts or something. But it's a real picture, not edited. And the students there, this group really immersed themselves in the exhibits, very physically, which I loved. This is the Greensboro lunch counter group, and they took a photo of themselves, imagining themselves at the lunch counter in the museum. And they did a great job with their escape game, and ended up they presented it to the class. All the students presented their games to the class, and we played all of these different games. And this one was so good that we brought it to the Smithsonian faculty group so that the professors could experience what an escape game is in an academic context and how the students made this happen. So this is them presenting their game to the Smithsonian Fellows, and here's another photo of it. And you can see we set the tables up like a lunch counter. And we had 2 groups of faculty, because we had a big group. The game is normally for about 4 to 6 players. And the faculty were role-playing the role of protesters or people sitting in at the lunch counter. And they were working with puzzles that involved real artifacts from the time, really engaging with the topic and the material. And the students used the original sources from the Smithsonian Museums and digital archives, and they did it in a way that was very sensitive to the, it's upsetting content of what the sit-ins represented, what they were protesting against. And faculty remarked that this was a really good experience and brought to life the history of this movement in a powerful way, and also made it very apparent how long the protest lasted, that it wasn't just a one-day sit-in, but it was a 6-month process with lots and lots of people involved. And the students managed to incorporate that in their game in a very powerful way. So what's next? This semester we're going to the National Archives, which is not part of the Smithsonian, but is on the mall near the Smithsonian Museums, and is a museum that houses the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, Magna Carta, and lots of very important documents. And 2019 is the 100th anniversary of Congress passing the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote. And they've invited us to run a workshop at the National Archives with the students doing escape games about voting rights. And it's going to be about the 19th Amendment as well as earlier amendments and poll taxes and things like that that have prevented people from voting or limited the right to vote in this country. So here's a little blurb. There we go. This is from the National Archives calendar. And if anyone's interested in trying this out and seeing how do escape games work in the classroom or museum context, you're welcome to come to this event on April 17th, 6 to to 8 p.m. at the National Archives Museum in DC, where this semester of gaming students will present their games that they haven't designed yet on different voting rights. Okay, and finally, I just wanted to say thank you. This has been an amazing experience. I want to thank the Smithsonian Institution and all the educators who shared their experiences with us, to Montgomery College, my dean and chair, the Polpet Humanities Institute, and especially Sarah, Denise, and Mimi for their leadership and advice, and to the cohort, which was wonderful, and finally to the MC Gaming students who inspire me. Their hard work and creative